AngularJS is an open source JavaScript framework that is used to create dynamic web applications. It uses these MVC or this model view controller framework. And it's written in JavaScript, so it's a JavaScript library that's built on top of JavaScript and jQuery. This means that you can have both traditional JavaScript and jQuery code inside Angular and you have no problem. Now, right out of the box, Angular comes with many built-in features. Most notably, its two-way data binding process, which is really important and really interesting. We'll see in a minute here. Other features include a templating directives, form validation services, and routing. Now, what I have here is a really simple AngularJS app. It doesn't have all the features built into it, features like the filter, routing, and services, which are beyond the scope of this course, but it does have some sufficient features to illustrate the lifecycle and the anatomy of the AngularJS application. So let's go over this application and see how it works. First of all, I want to point out where the model, the view, and controller are situated here in this application. So the view is basically the browser window, what you see in the browser, and that's the body of the application here. The view is the template, which is a collection of HTML markup tags plus its own AngularJS directives and syntax. So that's the view. The controller and the model are written in the code and the script in the JavaScript. So normally you don't want to put your script here on the same page as your HTML document. You want your JavaScript to be isolated. You don't want the script to be too obtrusive. So I have it here just to show you where things are situated so I don't have to flip back and forth between the two different files. Okay, so in the script we have the controller, and it's written here using a controller function. And inside the controller is where your model lives. Okay, you write your model in here. Models are just simply your properties and behaviors that attach to a scope object. Okay, so in here you also see I have another piece of information here. This is a directive. A directive is nothing more than a custom element that you can create inside your script or your web page. And so this directive, if you look up in the code, it's right here. All right. So mainly you have your view, which is up here in the code, the controller, and the model. Okay. So when an AngularJS application like this one here is loaded in the browser, three major phases are going to be processed. The first is a process called bootstrapping the template to the Angular application. And that is done by attaching a special directive called ng-app or ng-app to a HTML element anywhere in the body or an entire document. And like you see here, typically you want to attach it to the HTML element at the very top. So you want the entire document to be an Angular app. If you don't want to do that, you could take it down and move it to maybe just a body, or maybe just add it to a div tag or a fragment thereof, and that's fine too. So what that means is that when Angular look at this file, it's going to look for the ng-app, and from that point on, this is where the Angular application will be rendered. Okay, so that's the first step. So when this DOM, this is a static DOM, is rendered in the browser, Angular will pass through this DOM, and then it will look for all these controller or all these ng directives and any expressions here, and then replaces the DOM with its own DOM. It's just a live DOM. In other words, it needs to compile all these code and then replace it with its own code. Like how you would see a PHP file, it will be rendered in the browser and it only spits out the results of that page. The same process occurs here. And then the last step is that it allows this two-way data binding process, and this is how data binding process works. So it is established via a special object called the scope. And this scope object, if you look it down here in the code, this scope here, this scope is the link between the view and the controller. So that any changes you make in the scope or to any of these properties are reflected in the view instantly and vice versa. Okay, so this is a really important concept to understand. And we'll see how this works in action in just a few minutes. This is pretty much the anatomy of this Angular application. And I just want to mention one thing about scope here is that a scope is an object that is attached to every controller you create. So when you add another controller, a child scope will be attached or be a part of that controller. And you can have as many controllers as you want. And then controllers can be nested inside the view here. So here I have controller called hello controller. This is active, or this controller contains all the code within this div tag. Okay, so all of these in here, if I have any properties that I attach to its scope, will be displayed and shown here. If I have a second tag, another div tag, or it doesn't really matter what kind of tag it is, then that second controller has its own scope. So every controller has its scope. And then not only that, controllers can also be nested, just like you can do with your HTML elements. So you can see I have the button here, and these are all nested inside the div tag or nested inside the body tag, and so on. I can do the same thing with controllers. If I do that, though, then you have what's called a hierarchical structure of your scope. So you have a child scope, and you have the parent scope, and so on up and down the tree that way. Okay, so let's just run this application and then see what it looks like in the browser. I'm going to go and load this in the browser. All right, so here in the browser, you can see that I have a huge font here that says, welcome to AngularJS, followed by a message here, and then a message at the bottom is going to be displayed when I click to say it. But let me press the F12 key to load the developer tool so you can see the DOM tree. Okay, this is the live DOM. If you notice, if I expand this div tag, you see that, let me move this up just a little bit. Okay, so you see that this is the input tag. That's the input box there. And the model here we have is equal to hello message. Again, this is not a value. It is the actual property that is attached to its scope. And scope in Angular is signified by this equal sign with a $0 on the end here. So that is, it tells you that's a scope. But anyway, so you can see that the input tag has a value of hello. Now you may wonder where does hello come from. I didn't issue that command there. Well, we saw earlier that in the script, if I expand the script down here at the bottom, and then you will see that the script has a message said hello here that is attached to the hello message property of the scope. So that's where it comes from. So when I make changes to the view here, it also make changes to the scope. Of course, it doesn't go ahead and literally change the hello to something else, but in the scope, which is in memory, it will be changed automatically, and vice versa. And I'll show you an example of how that works using this two-way data binding process. Okay, so then this button here, if I go up a little bit, this button is using an ng-click directive. It's the same as a click event. And it's going to call a function called sayIt. Well, sayIt is here is a property of the scope and is going to call this anonymous function. And all it does is basically copying or moving the hello message from the hello property to the message here. And it won't show here until I click the button. So I'll click it now. You'll see that hello shows up here. And you saw the little purple marker highlighted here just a second ago, just to show you that that's the only place that has been changed. Okay, so if I add another message, say hello world, and if I click say it, you see that changes occurs right to this tag. So this is how things work. Nothing ordinary here, nothing interesting here yet. But let me go back to the code and let me do something. So a two-way data binding process is by attaching the ng model directive to one of the input, select, or the text area elements. Only those three as far as I know, because those three tags supply the input to the document. Okay, like a paragraph would not do that, right? Or HR would not give any input. So when you supply the ng model directive to this input tag, then inside the scope, if I make changes in the view, or if I make changes here programmatically in the code here, then it reflects live. One-way data binding works by issuing this expression here. So basically, I put the message property inside the pair of double curly braces here. This is the Angular expression. And all it does is basically outputting to the screen. It does not provide any input, so therefore there's no input coming in. So it's only one way going from the model or the controller to the view. Okay, so let me change this here to this hello message. So now what I'm showing here is basically if I make changes to the model here in the view, it's going to reflect in the scope, and then the scope will project this same data back to the view through this one-way data binding. So it really routes that way. So input here goes to the scope and comes back out to the view because I have it displayed in this one-way binding. And back in the browser, I'm going to refresh this screen. So you see that now it has the hello right there, whereas it was empty before, because now it's going to reflect the same data I put here in the view. So watch when I start typing this. Okay, you see it has a live update, and you can accomplish this using traditional JavaScript or jQuery the same way, but you will have to do a little bit more. In this example, you see that all I did was basically add the model or the property to another location within any of the Angular expressions, and it works right away. So Angular takes care of all the mechanisms behind the scenes. You don't have to do any of that, which is really, really nice. Let's go back in the code. I want to show you a little bit about the directive here. It's a custom directive. Again, it's just a custom element you can create. You can call it whatever you want, just like you would do in XML. You can have your own custom tags. So with this directive, and you can see this in other videos, but for now, I want to show you that in the directive, in the code, it looks similar to the controller. You have a directive function, and the name is the name of the directive, followed by an anonymous function, and it's going to return the template. So the template is really just a collection of HTML elements plus any Angular expressions or Angular syntax or code. So this h1 hello to AngularJS is going to be added or embedded inside my element here. That's what you saw. So if I go back to the browser, and if you look inside you see that this is my element here. Inside that element, you see the hello world, hello AngularJS here. Let's go back to the code and show you something. And again, because it's a template, that means I can put Angular expression here as well. I could put this message here, down here, in here. So I could say something like, welcome to Angular, and I could put here the hello message. Okay, I'm going to save this, and watch when I reload this. Okay, welcome to Angular, and hello, because I have hello. If I say hello world, you see that it happens live.